When people start talking about water, maybe the first thing that people jump to is utilities or access to
Definitely.
water,
Yeah.
and just
Yeah.
start going, oh, so this is what you mean. And then you go, no, it's actually everything. And then you start to go into agriculture, but a venture capital fund entirely dedicated to biodiversity hadn't been done, to our knowledge.
A very good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the Stream podcast with Will and Tom, an unscripted, unedited, free-flowing conversation featuring guests who reject the status quo with a bias for action in the world of water and beyond. My name is Tom Freyberg. I'm an environmental journalist and content creator specializing in water.
And I'm Will Sarni, a water strategy advisor and investor, doing my part to solve wicked water problems.
And as part of our water and nature season, we are delighted to welcome our first guest. But before we do, a quick word and thank to our ongoing partner and sponsor, Raymond James, as well as our charity partner, Frank Water in the UK, and all of our many knowledge and educational partners. So our next guest has been described as a coral reef conservationist turned startup operator and investor. He spent many years in the field in Australia, Madagascar, and the Cayman Islands, and we're very fortunate to be joined by him during this week. He's just announced the first big raise and the first big fund from Superorganism. So delighted to welcome yourself, Tom Quigley, the co-founder. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, Tom. Thank you, Will. Happy to join you.
Very good. So, Tom, lots we want to kind of dig into. I mean, one of the first, venture firms focused on biodiversity. But congratulations on the announcement. I mean, that's a huge announcement. Sort of talk us through the amount you raised and kind of the progress in getting to where you got to on that.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, it was a it was a really huge achievement from many contributions from our fantastic LPs. We wouldn't have been able to get here without their support and without the founders that we've backed who have continued to go on and continue to grow and raise and speak on our behalf as well. And so it really is one of those takes a village moments. So we're, for all of them in the entire superorganism community, we're very, very pleased to announce our 25.9 million first fund close. Our LPs, from the very beginning, we wanted to make sure that we worked with people that were mission aligned and clear about where we wanted to go with superorganism. And we're so happy to work with groups like Builders Vision, which is Lucas Walton's family office, Cisco Foundation, that's Cisco the tech company, not
With
Cisco
a
the
C.
food company. That's right. Yeah. And Cisco Foundation, who've been terrific partners for us. Family offices like Understory Ventures and Wedgetail Ventures, who have dedication to nature and nature outcomes, as well as mission-aligned individuals like Jeff Jordan from A16Z, Sven and Kristen Lindblad from Lindblad Expeditions, Mark Turtek, the former CEO of the Nature Conservancy. So we've really been exceedingly proud and fortunate for the LP community that we've brought together. That not just have brought in the capital to be able to support these founders into the next generation, but also are extremely bought in on the mission and the community, and we're looking forward to building a lot with them going forward.
So congratulations. And when I first discovered Superorganism, I was just so impressed with your focus and your mission. And Tom and I talked about, getting you on as a guest because it was so central to this season, but really central to everything that we've been doing over the, past several seasons. Really interesting LPs. Builder's Vision, absolutely get, but some of the others, that's really exciting. I mean, for me, listening to you run through the list validates that nature is really moving up in terms of importance to a variety of stakeholders. So can you talk a little bit about that in terms of where the excitement's coming from, about what you're doing, and, a little bit more about, the why?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think one of the aspects that we were pleasantly surprised by is the activity and participation from some corporates to be involved in superorganism, and especially a fund one. A fund one is always there's aspects of risk coming in with
Sure.
first-time managers, first fund, if you come in early in a fundraise, then there's always a question of whether they will or won't meet the target. And so some of our earlier backers even were some groups in the groups like Builders Vision who stepped forward and were really our
Hmm.
first anchor investor. Really helped catalyze a lot of these conversations with others. And so on the corporate side, you know, we were very pleased to see eyes light up moments from groups like BTG Pactual Timberland Investment Group, who
Hmm.
came in as an LP, and we've worked closely with them. And so, the timber industry is one that is
Sure.
really, it makes sense that nature is a really important aspect. I mean, it is the entirety of their business, forests and forest health.
Right.
And so they've long been vilified as the opposing end of forest and nature health.
Right.
But with so many forests in the United States, at least being working forests, there's a very strong interest across the timber industry to be working in carbon outcomes,
Hmm.
biodiversity outcomes, healthier and more resilient forests, resilient to invasive species, resilient to wildfires. All of that is kind of, I feel like we're entering sort of a generational shift where the corporations that have been working in the world now know and understand what the long-term impacts of that work
Sure.
looks like, and they are taking those impacts into account, impacts in their supply chain, up and down
Hmm.
throughout the tropics, and long-term outcomes that are required for them to continue building their business for the next 100 years. So that's been really terrific. Groups like BTG Pactual and TIG partnerships, as well as others.
You bring up you bring up a lot of important points. One is clearly that, yeah, foresters have been vilified, but in reality, they don't have a business unless they have healthy forests and healthy ecosystems and biodiversity. So it makes natural business sense, of course. And you
Hmm.
tapped into that, which I think is really interesting. So
I've,
Cisco with the C, that's
yeah,
interesting. Like,
yeah,
talk a little bit more about that.
Mm.
yep. So Cisco has a very forward-looking commitment to climate and regeneration. And so in the past year to year and a half, they rolled out their Regenerative Futures Fund, which is a $100 million commitment towards climate and other aspects like regenerative agriculture and groups like us, which is biodiversity focused and forward. And so half of that money is dedicated to grants, half of it is dedicated to investments, and they see regeneration and regenerative principles as being core to their business, which is
Hmm.
a really, it's a very progressive commitment, and we work closely with them on the deals side and on kind of the shape and direction of the fund. So they've been really great partners to us, partners to our portfolio companies as well, and they're yet another of the corporates that come from an unexpected place that see the importance and value of nature and biodiversity and broader global ecosystem
Right.
and economy.
Well, it's interesting. I keep going on this, but the whole digital play is baked into your investment thesis. Real-time data,
Hmm.
intelligence, and so on. So in a lot of ways, it's sort of a perfect fit for Cisco in what they do. And, I personally love that. I mean, it's
Mm.
got we want to do good in the world and have an impact. And it also lines up with who we are and where we sit in the ICT sector. So
Yeah. That's
kudos to
right.
you.
And I think that one of the aspects that we harp on, and that has also grown in terms of the narrative around nature in the last really like 3, 4 years, and Will and Tom, I'm sure you've seen this, is that the conversation around nature and biodiversity has picked up in a way that,
Hmm.
in the conservation world, we've kind of been waving our hands for this type of attention for a really long time. And really
Hmm.
in the past 3 years, 4 years, it's hit that upswing arc. And so when those conversations around nature and biodiversity, start happening more loudly at COP 30, like the carbon COPs and climate COPs, It starts being referred to more frequently as the dual crisis, of climate and biodiversity within some of these corporate conversations. I mean,
Hmm.
this is all the type of opportunity and like Overton window that we think it's important to seize and to start talking about the long-term outcomes of your work. And I think that the thing that we started getting some of these studies out around at the same time that that open window actually started to open. But there was this seminal study, I think in 2020 or 21, that was a really kind of economic wrap up of the global economy to see just how much of it touches nature. And the outcome of that was a pretty stunning number, which was that 55% of the global
Uh,
economy is moderately or heavily reliant on nature.
Mm.
And so that's, tens of trillions of dollars that,
Yep.
and this is also not just ecosystem services, right? I mean, there were studies from further back that
Right.
calculated the total amount of ecosystem services and the value that you get
It,
kind of as a global economy on that number. This is beyond that. This is just core product and services
right.
that in the GDP and are based upon and within nature. And now you actually can start to get corporates to start raising their heads and saying, there's a lot of risk
Uh,
baked in here.
right. I get it. And by the way, I love that report. That
Mhm.
was the WWF report from 2021 data. Absolutely mind-blowing. It wasn't it something like 60% of the global GDP? Is that right?
Yeah, 55% of global GDP,
Oh, okay.
moderately or heavily reliant. I
It
mean, it's stunning. It's a super high number.
stunning. That gets attention.
Mhm. Yeah. And there's ways that you can break it out as well. And I think that it's worth like further segmenting down because as we talk about nature, I mean, um, the word nature and the word biodiversity, there's plenty of discussion and debate. I mean, if you go further back even into it being biodiversity as a term was always heavily discussed by scientists in
Mm.
terms of its core and direct meaning versus things like species richness and abundance. But if we are to talk about in nature, I mean, do rocks count? Does water count? I mean, it's abiotic factors like sand are really critical to things like
Hmm.
construction industries. Um, is it nature or is it not nature? And so there is ways that you can slice up that number to pull out sort of
Right.
abiotic
Right.
factors and segment down further to heavily reliant, aka, you're directly extracting or using that versus benefiting from some of the services, but the number is still in the tens of trillions. And if you're talking about like what a TAM looks like for nature, I mean, that's just a little hard to beat.
Tom, it sounds like a great business opportunity. I think
One
you're in
might
a,
say.
one might say that you are spot on in terms of seizing the moment. Yeah, I get very excited by what you're doing. I just think
I
it's
appreciate that.
It's
brilliant, strategic.
Yeah, the 55% is quite a mind-boggling number as well, isn't it? But yeah, I mean, congrats, Tom, on kind of building the first fund. I think it's a great achievement. I think your positioning, focusing on sort of biodiversity and nature, amidst a kind of huge number of sort of climate tech funds is
Mhm.
probably testament to how you've positioned the fund. And by the way, I said this to my team when we looked at your website. I think it's without a doubt one of the best designed websites for a fund I've ever seen. I mean, this thing pops. The design, it's amazing.
Yep.
We've actually found out the name of the design team to send it to the team to look into
Oh,
because honestly,
well, I'll
dude,
give
it
them
is like
a
an we see a lot of websites and that was up there. Like it was like wow. So congrats on that. But maybe to kind of link this to some of your like portfolio companies and kind
mm,
of how you see actually solutions within that biodiversity field because it is quite broad.
yeah.
And then if we go one stage further, kind of linking to the theme of water and nature, like where you see the intersection with water and some of the biodiversity solutions as well.
Definitely. Well, first I'll go ahead and give a free plug to the team that we worked with here. Good Side on the brand side and Kinetic on the website side. Both of them are extremely powerful wizards, and we were very, very fortunate to work with them. And it was a very fun process. Doing
Mm,
brand work should be fun, and so we
100%.
were
Yeah.
really fortunate to get to work with them. And thank you. So one of the things that we think about, when we're considering, and really from the very beginning when we were considering venture capital for biodiversity and thinking about a first fund in that niche, because there are plenty of very good nature funds that exist in out there currently and historically. But a venture capital fund entirely dedicated to biodiversity hadn't been done, to our knowledge. Um, and so we were thinking about, could it work? What would these companies look like? What would a portfolio look like of approaches that could affect? And really baked into the framing there was two things. One is these need to look like venture profile solutions for the fund to succeed. And that means in under a decade and global scale growth of the business to being $100 million plus revenue business. And that actually, we believe can fit very well with the type of solutions that we need to see for biodiversity, because we need to see solutions come into play in under a decade. We're already, losing time every day. And venture capital companies can actually look like a very good map to the scale of problem, the speed that we need to actually get it into work on. And so on that side, we are really looking for ambitious, high velocity businesses that, have large industry and customer bases already versus really making a market. We do look at some things in carbon, look at some things in biodiversity credits, and have some portfolio investments there. But what we get really excited by are things that work within these existing large industries to accelerate the transition away from those harmful practices, to give new tools to be able to truly understand what their impacts are and avoid the worst of it, to do things in a lighter load way, and in some cases to disrupt entirely and to shift into a new paradigm where we may be able to have both, abundance for the 8 billion going 10 billion people that we're going to have on this planet, while also being able to defend the species and ecosystems that really form the connective tissue for our survival spacesuit on this planet Earth that flies around the sun. So that was critical, thinking that we need to have both the large-scale impacts to biodiversity, species and ecosystems, and a venture-looking profile to be able to really rapidly run up that growth curve. And so where some of that starts to intersect with water, there's a lot of different areas, because water, we see biodiversity as this cross-cutting thing that goes through many different industries. And, it's part of our secret sauce is that we are able to work with a portfolio and build a portfolio of companies that touch oceans, built environment, forests, enabling technologies, and have this diverse, generalist, and stable portfolio that isn't too exposed to any of the individual ups and downs of a single industry, but that can, catch tailwinds and ride some up, and if we pick right. Water, I see, is a very similar theme. Water is something that cuts across many different industries and can, and I'm sure that you all have, experienced this yourselves. When people start talking about water, maybe the first thing that people jump to is utilities or access to water, and just start going, oh, so this is what you mean. And then you go, no, it's actually everything. And then you start to go into agriculture, and you start to go into, watershed management and forests and cities and all of these different things, and fabric and materials and use of water. And so the air, we share a kinship in that front. We see that same thread that runs across all of these different types in the economy. And there's so many, like the Venn diagram overlap between nature and water is, as you would expect, very, very high. And this is to, unfortunately, for my ocean friends, exclude all of the salty water. And even if we do that, then the overlap on water is extremely high. And so areas that we get interested and excited by, I could pause there before I ramble on for the next 35 minutes.
I've heard that fresh water does intersect with oceans, so don't dismiss it yet.
It's been rumored.
I heard it at a conference. I think somebody had a slide, Tom, and it was captivating.
Went too fast. It's hard to say.
So I'll go second what Tom said about your website. It is just really, really well done. One of the many things that struck me was how you're framing your investment thesis
Mhm.
and how you've categorized your portfolio companies. Can you just talk a little bit about that? Because I found it to be really compelling.
Definitely. So, if we go back to that Venn diagram of venture scale solutions and global impacts on biodiversity, our three investment pillars are areas that we think we will find companies in the middle of that Venn diagram. And so, the first area that we look at is extinction drivers. The second is climate and biodiversity, and the third is enabling technologies. And all three of these are strategies where we think that we'll find both of those two things. The first area we look at is a very top-down approach and starting from first principles on biodiversity. So in many ways, you can think of us like a climate tech fund, except instead of focusing on the things that drive climate change, we focus on the things that drive biodiversity loss. And so switching out that lens lets you see a whole different suite of
Hmm.
opportunities and things. Because if you were focusing on things that drive climate change, you're going to be looking at emissions largely. But biodiversity loss, a whole different suite of things, and you can't get there through carbon all the time. So biodiversity loss is largely driven by overexploitation of resources, land use change, pollution, and invasive species. And climate, we've siloed that out. So on those four things, if you take that lens specifically, you then go, okay, what are the industries that are largely responsible for those drivers? And that's where you start seeing a different suite of companies. There's a good amount of overlap in things like agriculture and forests, but there's a lot of other things that don't get caught up in here. So pollutants, for example, is a really good area where, and also an area that intersects with water quite heavily, where it does not necessarily intersect with climate at all. And so companies that are going out and raising money in water and pollutant space can't really tap into climate tech funds that have maybe gigaton carbon requirements.
Hmm.
Invasive species is another. One of our companies called Inversa focuses on invasive species removal and then processing of that into luxury leather, which they're then able to work with large groups like
Yeah.
Gabriella Hearst and Tory Burch to replace the exotic leather that they're already using and replace it with something that's not just, environmentally neutral, but extremely regenerative. And so they work with lionfish from the Caribbean. They work with Burmese python in the Florida Everglades, and they work with Asian carp in the Mississippi River Delta. And this is the type of solution that sounds like on paper very exciting. And if you're a climate tech fund, you kind of can't touch it because
Mhm.
where's the carbon? Where's the climate, right? You can see all of the good benefits. There's benefits up and down the whole stack here.
Yeah.
There's benefits for Gabriella Hearst. There's benefits for the local governments, and there's benefits for the
Right.
Mississippi River. But if you're trying to underwrite to carbon, you can't get there. So that's an example of why we're able to see and back the kinds of things that other people don't in that first thesis and broadly throughout the portfolio.
I, I think that's a key takeaway. And maybe that was the aha moment for me that I hadn't really seen anybody frame it the way you framed it. And,
Well,
the construct was really, really interesting.
the thinking is largely influenced in two ways, and so and uh, I want to get back to make sure that I hit on the other two thesis areas, the climate and the enabling
Hmm.
technology ones. But as a quick segue, I'll say uh, this thinking is influenced both by my background and by my co-founder's background. My co-founder, Kevin Webb, has been in venture capital for his whole career. Did a Stanford undergrad in Earth-related and planetary sciences, and then worked at the Webb Investment Network and as a venture capital investor backing some early, unicorns from very early stage.
Hmm.
Had a great and successful career there, and was always also fascinated by nature. And starting in the kind of 2 years before Superorganism, um, reaching out and having conversations with very forward-thinking groups um, to shape some thinking around what it might look like to do investing in nature and biodiversity from a venture-looking lens. And my side, I have a background both on the kind of the coral reef side, as originally as a conservationist and spending 4 years or so in the field, in like you said, Tom, Australia, Madagascar, and the Cayman Islands. Then in a tech startup world for the next 3 years after that. So I'm this kind of mishmash Frankenstein of both of those worldviews, and and where they really came together. And this team was very formative in my thinking. Was a group called Conservation X Labs, led by Paul Bungie and Alex Dagan.
Hmm.
And with 4 years with them, I saw a really wide range of different types of technologies and solution sets that could apply to biodiversity. And that, was very formative in my thinking about how do we move from, okay, conservation work to what tech can we use to speed up and enable conservation work to where do we work at the highest level with the most leverage and the most speed to reduce the biodiversity drivers entirely. And so that's really what we aim to do with Superorganism today. And I can get into some of the enabling technology pieces as well. But let me just touch on quickly the last two thesis areas as well, because we have a couple of different strategies. I'd say the second one we look at is the overlap of climate and biodiversity. And so climate is obviously a driver of biodiversity loss, but there's many good people that are focusing on that, boiling that ocean, right? And so what we don't focus on are the broader climate, um, things like infrastructure and grid, battery technologies, except where it might,
Hmm.
overlap with extraction from natural areas um, and transmission, et cetera. Where we do focus is on the overlap of climate and nature and where we're able to really, hit two nails with the same hammer. And so we focus on the overlap on nature, both very directly, things like soils and oceans and wildfires, but also indirectly, and where we're able to do things, for example, like uh, uh, do bird monitoring around offshore wind turbines to be able to better understand the environmental impacts. And that's both for siting and permitting, for ongoing monitoring, and eventually even for things like dynamic curtailment, where you are slowing and stopping those turbines in areas of times of high bird migration or rare endangered bird fly-throughs. And so this company, Spore, which just raised its Series A, we came in at seed. They work to add their AI layer onto any type of commodity hardware camera, and that can work, on the actual tower. It can work on a
Hmm.
buoy nearby. They have a collaboration with Fugro for that, um, and they're able to monitor the bird species, the distance from the turbine, the velocity that it's moving, and have that permanent, ongoing, persistent monitoring. Once you're able to do that and unlock the, offshore wind, onshore wind, nighttime for other species like bats, moving into other types of infrastructure that are human and nature interface. So, there's a lot of opportunity in just the climate and biodiversity segment
Hmm.
that might not be thought of necessarily as climate. But if you're able to put a wind farm in the ground a year earlier, there's a really real climate impact to that.
Hmm.
And in many cases, it's being bottlenecked by bird monitoring, which is a surprise. And the third area we look at is enabling technologies, which is where we're looking for the real frontier edge of things like AI, genetics and biotech, robotics, space tech, but
Hmm.
focusing on the suite of those things that puts new tools into the hands of the scientists and conservationists that are doing the work. So really, those companies are focused on the larger commercial, industrial, the large opportunity. But all of those founders are very dedicated to what types of things they are able to do that with conservationists and being able to get those tools into their hands earlier so we can continue to improve the work that they need to be doing and unlock new opportunities. So a good example, a company that we just invested in recently is a Swedish company called Deep Forestry, which is building fully autonomous below canopy forest drones. And these are literally open box, and the drone will go out and map a hectare of forest for you, fully pilotless. It has 3D LiDAR sensors, hyperspectral sensors, and optical sensors on there. And there's ways that you can add new sensors on top of it. And so in the future, we may also add, for example, an eDNA sniffer or something that you're able to actually
Right.
start monitoring what the full species assemblage is of those forests. But today, you can use their services to fly this drone either on a long transect or on a hectare of forest in 20 minutes and end up with a full 3D digital map of that forest with down to leaf level object segmentation. And now things like the foresters are using for, DBH, diameter at breast height, to understand sort of individual sampling plots in a forest to, statistically model what the total both timber offtake and carbon stored in that forest might be. Now you can get it down to extremely high precision, and you can start to understand things like soil infiltration of water and overall health of the forest and any invasive species that might be there, or even down to if early and rapid monitoring for things like timber bark beetle, where you start to know that an infestation is coming on a corner of your field, which could be, devastating to your forest plot, but now you're able to catch it before that fire starts.
Really interesting.
Super interesting, isn't it? It's a different angle at coming at these different areas. I mean, if you think about the data that links between the bird conservation the data will then drive kind of the optimization of those wind turbines, or the data you're gathering from those autonomous drones to actually map the rainforest and actually sort of direct the behavior. It's super interesting.
Yeah, and we love when our portfolio companies work together like that as well. So, community is very important to us, and it's very important that, these founders that are building something very rare and odd are surrounded by other founders who are also in that same boat rowing alongside them, right? And so wherever we can make these introductions for our founders to work together, we do, and we've already seen some really cool and interesting collaborations come out of that.
So you invest typically around sort of seed, Series A is where you're targeting, and the sort of the average pot size, the investment size. What are we looking at?
We're pre-seed and seed, so we like to get involved as early as possible. We generally write tickets of about $250,000 to $500,000. We're generally not lead investors, so we'll come in alongside a strong lead, either in the industry or in the impact area or technology area that company is most relevant for, and we will work to be your biodiversity partner. And so what that means functionally, it means introductions to corporates. So we have been kind of building this deep bench of companies that are, either have, risk or access to or direct business lines around nature, that are interested in using new technologies to be able to make this transition that we've talked about. And so being able to introduce these companies to them, that's a really strong value add. Also on the fundraising side. So as the, one standing out in the field waving this flag about biodiversity, we've collected a large group of peer VCs who are also interested in biodiversity, but maybe it's a climate fund or an ag fund or a city fund. They want to find the right one for them to take their first or second kind of bet on nature. And so when we invest into a company, we have that short list pretty much right away of being able to, okay, at your next round, these are the 5 people that are going to be really interested in you, and let's start getting those kind of warm mentions in with them early on, so that by the time it comes into that fundraise moment, that really critical moment, you're able to start off with a basis of people that you don't need to explain what biodiversity is or invasive species are. In fact, they've probably already heard of you and they're ready to start conversations right away.
Do you think, you mentioned your background as a sort of conservationist tech startup, sort of obviously in the kind of tech founder space. And then when you talk about your, it's Kevin Webb, isn't it? Your co-founder in the VC space. Do you think the backgrounds that you've both got collectively to sort of complement each other, but that helps you have that kind of spidey sense of what you're looking for, not only in terms of the founder and the vision, the area they're in, because it's kind of that, you described it as putting these founders together with these kind of crazy, wacky, odd ideas, but actually we need to normalize some of these ideas, right? But it's like, but do you think the background of you and Kevin, when you kind of join forces, it means that you have the ability to back the right horse, right?
Yeah, definitely. And it also adds to a lot of credibility with founders. And that credibility, there's 2 things. I mean, one is very much like, have you been here before? Have you done this before? And Kevin has a decade of seeing a lot of different things play out on the venture side. So that's companies that have gone extremely well. The companies like Verkada and Ironclad that are now multi-billion dollar businesses, and also companies that have gone the other direction. And that happens in all venture portfolios. And so he has seen and worked with a lot of founders who have gone through a lot of hard decisions, because the reality of every press release that you see is that there's a lot of toil and uncertainty in the founder lives behind that. And so
Right.
being able to be that trusted partner and being able to say, this is what I've seen before, and not just this is what I think, that is a really, really strong, this is one of the reasons that founders, trust us and call us and invite us to their weddings is because of that long basis of having seen it and done that before. And then on my side as well, being able to, we had a call once with a company who's in our portfolio, Planet A Foods, based in Germany. They're building chocolate that comes from not chocolate, and so their product is made from sunflower seeds and oat kernels, and it is fermented and roasted exactly so that the outcome melts, tastes, snaps, and cooks just like chocolate. And so when we were speaking with them originally, they came in and they said, you are the first ones that we have had to not explain to that there's a linkage between cocoa and tropical rainforest deforestation. And not only did we come in with that understanding and knowledge already, and the reason saying, actually, this is why we are excited about talking with you, but also, I pulled up my phone in the background and I pulled out a video of, hiking off trail in Honduras in a mountain and coming on a below canopy slash site in a national park where there was an illegal cocoa plantation being grown
Mm.
underneath the canopy there. And so, that's the type of experience and field experience that you just really would not expect from a VC, and also adds credibility for these conversations. So, when, I can't speak for all founders, but we like to have that kind of that very close relationship with our founders and build the trust so that they're able to call us in scary moments and moments of uncertainty and moments of major decisions to be able to kind of speak from that position of been there.
Well, I think if your portfolio company founders are inviting you to their weddings, you must be doing something right. I mean,
I
Yeah.
love how
I'm
you
not
use
sure
that.
that would be that many investors would say the same thing. They probably get kept at an arm's length distance, or at least sat on a separate table at the wedding, maybe. But
Yeah, that's right.
have you heard of Tony Chocolonely as a kind
Yes,
of
definitely.
disruptive chocolate brand, and how they kind of raised awareness of slave labor and everything that goes wrong with like big cocoa, big chocolate? So yeah, amazing to hear there's another company in Germany that's looking at this in a different way. So
Yeah, several. I mean,
yeah.
it's one of the examples too on how I think you have to slice up a problem and look at it with nuance. I mean,
Mm.
chocolate is a major driver of tropical rainforest deforestation. It's bottlenecked by about, five or six companies in the
Right.
middle that then rebrand out into or sell to other companies at the top. So most of the chocolate that you actually buy then gets filtered through those
Right.
those producers.
Hmm.
But you know, a large percentage, to I believe the majority of chocolate comes from smallholder farmers, and in many cases in sub-Saharan Africa, and then out into tropical regions of high biodiversity. And so,
Mm, mm,
in cases of land use change, I mean, this is a real challenge, and it's also a livelihood challenge as well, because it's not a farmer's this is a farmer's livelihood, possibly a generational farm.
mm,
It has, in many cases, been a ticket away from extreme poverty, and and so we need to have solutions on one side, like Tony's Chocolonely, to be able to move towards higher price luxury regenerative chocolate that prevents slave labor, that increases the positive livelihoods and the rights and dignity of those on the ground
mm,
farmers. And also, we need to be able to create a pricing pressure to reduce the incentives for bad behavior at the lower end of the
Hmm.
market on buyers that do not care and will not change their behavior. And so for those, what do you do? And part of the answer is disruption. And so being able to really drive the market more towards the higher end, luxury, regenerative, below canopy, conservation friendly cacao, I
mm.
mean, the more that that middle of that spectrum tilts in that direction versus the other direction, That's a very positive win. So all markets are nuanced like this and really have, different ways that you can invest, different ways that you can consider what types of technology is appropriate and useful and high leverage there, and a lot of ways to slice it as well between climate, biodiversity, and human rights.
Well said, well said. Well, Tom, unfortunately, we've come to the end of the podcast recording. So again, congratulations to you and Superorganism. Raising the first fund over 25 million, huge achievement. Great way to sort of kickstart the new year as well, 2026. And yeah, it's been a pleasure having you on, and really love how you've got this kind of unique value proposition that's got the attention of the family offices and the corporates as well. So yeah, carry on doing what you're doing. Will, final thoughts from you, and we'll close up.
This just really reinforced my belief that what you're doing is absolutely inspiring and maybe equally, if not more important, understandable. Like, this is understandable to the layperson. Like, how could they not get this? So, it's compelling and inspiring. And you have a great website, by the way, just to punch that up a little bit.
Yeah.
Not just because it's beautiful to look at, but it's spot on in terms of how you talk about what you do. So, congratulations. I think you guys are going to crush it, really.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I appreciate y'all having me on. And, that level of understandableness, the inspiration that we try to kind of drive with the branding and being able to paint a picture of a future which isn't dystopian. I mean, this is something that we need to have a
Right.
vision of in the future that isn't predicated on guilt and loss and avoidance of fear and worst outcomes. I mean, we need to show what it looks like to have a beautiful future filled with nature. I mean, I guess the last thing I'll leave on is if you look at the chart of decline, I mean, it's pretty dramatic for wildlife populations. It's been a 73% decline in wildlife populations since 1970. But most of us haven't been alive. Well, okay, that's not fair. If you put yourself on that chart of
Thanks, Tom. I appreciate that.
if you put yourself on the chart of that year, I actually find it to be, a way to be inspired. Is that even if you think about the most nature that you can ever remember, there's the possibility, if you look backwards, there has been even more nature than that in the past. And so that means that the future can hold even more nature than you can possibly personally remember. And that's a story of abundance and renewal and revival that is extremely empowering.
And it's optimistic.
Yeah.
It is optimistic, it's positive, and I'm a big fan of using the word abundance because I believe that we can create abundance instead of wringing our hands about scarcity. So again, you picked your words carefully, and you did. It's sticky. So, Tom, a million thanks. This was great, really.
Thanks
so much, Tom.
Appreciate
All right,
it.
speak soon. Thank you.
Take care.
Take care. Bye.